The member from Toronto Danforth.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, my question to the Acting Premier. A few weeks ago, the government issued a request for qualifications for the Regional Express Rail project. Once again, the government is using costly private financing. The Auditor General said private financing and procurement is vastly more expensive than traditional procurement, with no evidence of value for money. But we also learned that the Premier plans to sign a long-term operations contract. When did the people of Ontario vote to hand over the GO Rail system to a private investor for 30 years?
Thank you. Acting Premier.
Speaker, Minister of Economic Development and Growth on behalf of Minister of Transportation.
Minister of Economic Development and Growth.
Thanks very much, Speaker. I know this particular member from the NDP asked a transit question last week, and perhaps he's decided to come back with a follow-up because, well, yes, in some respects, because perhaps there's sudden interest, but also, Speaker, perhaps he didn't like the answer he received last week with respect to the unprecedented amounts that our government's investing in transit. Speaker, in all of my time here in this legislature, including a stint for 3.5 years as the Minister of Transportation, it never failed to amaze me that Ontario's NDP, who purport to want to see more transit expansions take place in Toronto and elsewhere, would consistently vote against moves by our government to make those unprecedented announcements. Regional Express Rail, Speaker, is a $13.5 billion transit expansion that this province, the likes of which this province has never seen before. And I would have thought, for a party that suggests that it is progressive from time to time, I would have thought that they'd want to support this initiative, Speaker. It's really clear. It's really clear to me that they don't, based on the kinds of questions that they've been asking on this topic just here in the last couple of weeks. And I'm looking forward to the next 2 rounds of this question.
Supplementary.
Well, Speaker, I'm not surprised the minister doesn't want to address the question of privatization. The Liberal government privatized the hydro system and sold off Hydro One without a public mandate. This helped the Premier's Bay Street friends and Liberal campaign donors, but it has hurt Ontario ratepayers and the public. So why is the Premier doing the exact same thing with public transit?
Minister.
Well, Speaker, and I can certainly understand why the NDP member from Toronto Danforth wouldn't want to talk about the unprecedented amount that we are investing in public transit. Speaker, you know, I got to tell you, just a few days ago, the Premier of our province signed an MOU with the City of Toronto, and in Budget 2018, there was a significant amount of money that was contained in the budget to help deliver on projects that I know constituents in Toronto Danforth want to see built. So, for example, funding in our budget for the Toronto Relief Line, Speaker, funding in our budget for the Yonge Street North subway extension, funding in our budget, Speaker, for more transit options in Scarborough. But he asked a question about Regional Express Rail, Speaker, and also Waterfront LRT. That's the other project I should mention as well. Speaker, he talked about GO Regional Express Rail. Why in the world would Ontario's NDP not want to see two-way all-day GO service with trains running every 15 minutes, Speaker? It's beyond me. I would have thought they'd want to stand and applaud this initiative. Maybe they'll have a chance.
Final supplementary.
Well, thank you, Speaker, and I think it's entirely clear why the minister doesn't want to touch the word privatization, because he knows what impact it has. He avoids the question profoundly. The Liberals could have modernized Ontario's hydro system without selling it off. Instead, they signed inflexible, long-term contracts with private financiers, locking Ontario ratepayers into decades of high prices. Now the Premier is doing the same thing with public transit, locking Ontario riders into a long-term private contract for the GO Rail network. She's already sold off Hydro One with no public mandate, added billions in private profits onto Ontario hydro bills just to help her Bay Street friends and the Liberal Party. Why would she make the exact same mistake with public transit?
Thank you. Minister.
Well, Speaker, after 4 years of opposing every single initiatives taken by our government designed to expand public transit, it's not at all shocking to me to see that member from the Toronto area, from the NDP caucus, on the eve of an election campaign trying to make up for lost time. Unfortunately, Speaker, I know people who live in Toronto Danforth, and I know they want to see the Toronto Relief Line built. Our government's helping to build it. I know people who live in Scarborough want to see more transit options, Speaker. Our government is funding the initiatives that will help provide that transit for them. I know people who live in Willowdale and Richmond Hill and they want to see the Yonge North Subway extension get built, Speaker. That's what we're doing. In addition to that, Speaker, on GO Regional Express Rail, two-way all-day GO service, 15 minutes, trains will be electrified, expanding to Niagara, expanding to Bowmanville, making fares more cheaper, running the Union Pearson Express at overcapacity because it's so popular, Speaker. Our government opening a subway in Vaughan last December, Speaker. Our government has built, expanded, and plans to do more in transit than any other government in history. I would have thought the
Thank you.